a 20-year-old king stood at the edge of a river in 334 BC, staring across at an army that outnumbered his own. His advisors begged him to wait until dawn. The enemy cavalry lined the opposite bank, a wall of steel and horseflesh, waiting to cut down anyone who dared to cross. This young king made a decision that defied all military logic, something so audacious that it would either make him a legend or get him killed in the next few minutes. In ancient warfare, battles were won by whoever could maintain formation. Break your formation, and death was certain. The Persians had built an empire on this principle. When they positioned themselves behind the river Granicus, they believed they had created the perfect killing ground. They were wrong. "50 years before that river crossing, ancient Greece was tearing itself apart. Athens and Sparta, the two superpowers of the Greek world, had spent decades locked in devastating wars. The great temples of the Athenian Acropolis lay in ruins, burned by Persian invaders. The legendary 300 Spartans had fallen at Thermopylae, holding a mountain pass against impossible odds. Greece was exhausted, vulnerable. The sophisticated city-states looked down on their northern neighbor Macedonia as backwards primitives, barely Greek at all. Then King Philip II of Macedonia introduced a weapon that revolutionized ancient warfare, an 18-foot pike called the sarissa, twice the length of a normal spear, thousands of men moving in perfect unison, presenting a wall of iron spear tips that could not be stopped. In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chæronea, Philip crushed the combined forces of Thebes and Athens. Through this victory, he united virtually all of Greece under his command. Only Sparta refused to submit. Philip began planning an invasion of the Persian Empire, the ailing superpower of the East, whose vast riches were ripe for plunder. On the eve of launching his war, Philip was assassinated by his own bodyguard. Court politics in Macedonia were brutally violent, and the king became just another victim. The throne passed to his 20-year-old son, Alexander. Alexander was no pampered prince. He had been tutored by Aristotle, one of history's greatest philosophers. He had commanded cavalry in battle at age 16. His mother had filled his head with legends that he descended from Achilles and Heracles. He believed he was destined for greatness. But first, he had to survive. Rivals at court were eliminated. Rebellions in Illyria, Thessaly, and central Greece were crushed. When the ancient city of Thebes dared to revolt, Alexander made an example that sent shockwaves through the Greek world. He completely destroyed the city and sold its entire population into slavery. The message was clear: cross me, and there will be no mercy. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander led 40,000 men across the Hellespont into Asia Minor, into Persian territory. It was the start of one of the most extraordinary military campaigns in human history. His army was a machine of war perfected over decades. The corps consisted of 9,000 Macedonian soldiers wielding those 18-foot pikes, forming up 16 ranks deep, an unstoppable wall of death from the front, but dangerously vulnerable to attacks from the sides. This vulnerability was protected by 3,000 elite shield-bearers with shorter spears. Behind them stood 12,000 Greek allies and mercenaries, expert javelin throwers who could take down charging cavalry or chariots, and the shock troops, the companion cavalry, 1,800 elite horsemen that Alexander himself would lead into battle. This was the army that approached the river Granicus, where Persian provincial governors had gathered with 10,000 cavalries to stop the Macedonian invasion. The Persians had positioned their cavalry wall right at the riverbank. Behind them, Greek mercenaries stood in reserve. It was a perfect defensive position. Alexander's advisors urged him to wait until dawn, to cross under cover of darkness. Alexander refused. He sent a small squadron of cavalry splashing into that river, followed by a regiment of infantry. A deliberate, visible, frontal assault in broad daylight against an entrenched enemy position. The Persians unleashed a hail of javelins, darts, and arrows. Men and horses were cut down in the water. Those who reached the far bank were immediately charged by Persian cavalry. It looked like a massacre in the making. But while the Persians focused all their attention on this apparently suicidal attack, Alexander was buying time. Time for the rest of his army to cross the river. Time for that unstoppable Macedonian wall of pikes to ford the water and form up on the far bank. Alexander himself was in the absolute thick of the fighting, drawing Persian commanders to him. A Persian noble named Rosses struck Alexander's helmet so hard it shattered, cutting into his scalp. Before Alexander could recover, another Persian noble, Mithridates, raised his sword to strike the killing blow from behind. Black Clytus, one of Alexander's commanders, cut off the Persian's arm in mid-swing. Sword and all, Alexander survived by inches. His gambit had worked. The entire army was now across the river. The Persian cavalry faced a bristling wall of Macedonian spears, and most turned and fled. The Persian Greek mercenaries, who had been held in reserve, never even joined the fight. Alexander surrounded them and massacred them to the last man. The message was unmistakable. The young Macedonian king was not just brilliant, he was ruthless. And he was coming for the entire Persian Empire. The victory at Granicus opened the gates of Asia Minor. The city of Sardis surrendered without a fight. But Alexander knew the Persians would not give up easily. Their powerful navy controlled the eastern Mediterranean and could cut his supply lines back to Greece. Rather than fight at sea, Alexander made another unconventional choice: capture every Persian naval base on land. The coastal cities of Miletus and Halicarnassus resisted fiercely, but eventually fell. By 333 BC, Alexander had pushed deep into Cilicia when he received stunning news. King Darius III himself, the Persian king of kings, had mobilized the main Persian army and moved to block Alexander's escape route near the coastal plain of Issus. Darius had chosen his battlefield carefully, a narrow strip of land just 6 miles wide between mountains and sea. It would force Alexander to fight on Persian terms, but it also meant Darius could not fully exploit his enormous numerical advantage. The two armies deployed for battle. Alexander positioned himself and his elite troops on the right wing. When the battle began, he led another devastating charge, this time straight at the Persian center, straight at Darius himself. Darius, seeing this Macedonian king cutting a bloody path directly toward him, did something that would haunt his reputation forever. He fled the battlefield in his royal chariot, abandoning his army. The Persian line collapsed. It became a massacre. According to ancient accounts, Alexander's men used Persian corpses to fill a ravine so they could cross it. The mighty Persian Empire had suffered another catastrophic defeat at the hands of a 22-year-old king. Over the next year, Alexander methodically dismantled Persian power in the west. The Phoenician cities submitted, ending Persian naval dominance. The island city of Tyre resisted for 7 months, before falling to one of the most remarkable sieges in ancient history. Then came Egypt. The Persian governor handed over the entire province without a fight. Egyptian priests crowned Alexander as pharaoh, liberator from Persian rule. At Memphis, he founded the city of Alexandria. Then he made a pilgrimage to the desert oracle of Siwa, where the priests declared him the son of Amun, king of the gods. In just 3 years, Alexander had gone from a young king struggling to secure his throne to a living god, ruler of territories stretching from Greece to Egypt. But Darius was still alive, still claiming to be the rightful ruler of the Persian Empire. He sent Alexander a desperate offer: a fortune in gold, his daughter's hand in marriage, and half the empire in exchange for peace. Alexander's response was chilling. "I do not want half the empire. I am coming to take it all." In 331 BC, near modern-day Mosul in Iraq, Darius assembled one final army at Gaugamela. This was his last stand. He commanded between 50,000 and 80,000 men, infantry from across the empire, cavalry from Armenia, India, and Central Asia, 200 scythe chariots, even war elephants. Alexander was outnumbered perhaps 2 to 1. Darius had chosen open ground, perfect for his numerical advantage and his devastating chariots. His men had worked to flatten and clear the terrain. The battle began with Alexander doing something unexpected. He led his right wing out to the side, as if trying to flank the massive Persian army. It seemed absurd, but it was another trap. The Persians shifted troops from their center to counter Alexander's movement, weakening their middle just as he had planned. When he saw it had worked, Alexander ordered the charge, leading his cavalry straight at that weakened center, fighting once more toward Darius himself. And once more, Darius fled. But this time, Alexander's left wing under his general Parmenion was surrounded and in desperate trouble. Alexander had to abandon his pursuit of Darius and wheel around to save them. The fighting was brutal. 60 of his elite cavalry died. But eventually, as word spread that Darius had fled again, the last Persian forces broke and ran. Gaugamela was a complete victory. The road to Babylon lay open. Alexander entered the capital in triumph as its new rightful ruler. At Susa, he sat on the royal throne of Persia. At Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, he ordered the city pillaged and burned. Retribution for the Persian invasion of Greece 150 years earlier. Conquering the Persian Empire was not enough for Alexander. It was just the beginning. He chased Darius's fleeing remnants into the eastern provinces, only to find the Persian king murdered by his own governor, Bessus, who proclaimed himself the new ruler. Alexander gave Darius a royal burial, then set out to find and kill the usurper. This pursuit led him deep into Afghanistan, where he founded cities that would bear his name for millennia, modern Herat and Kandahar. He captured Bessus and sent him back to Persia for execution. But local tribes rose in revolt, trapping Alexander in a grinding war of ambushes and raids. He pushed on to modern Tajikistan, founded Alexandria Eshate, the furthest, at what he believed was the edge of the Persian Empire. He fought and crushed nomadic raiders from the steppes. He adopted Persian customs and dress, which infuriated his Macedonian troops, who saw these practices as signs of weakness and decadence. In a drunken rage at Samarkand, he killed his old friend Clytus, the man who had saved his life at Granicus. But still he pushed forward, into Pakistan, into India, across the Hindu Kush mountains. He won a costly battle against King Porus and his war elephants at the Hydaspes River. And then, after 8 years and thousands of miles, his army said no more. At the river Hyphasis, they mutinied. They refused to march another step. Alexander was furious, but he had no choice. He turned the army around. The return journey was brutal. Many died crossing the Gedrosian Desert, a waterless wasteland that claimed more lives than any battle. By the time Alexander reached Babylon in 323 BC, he had been campaigning for a decade. He was planning his next invasion of Arabia when he developed a sudden fever. Days later, Alexander the Great was dead. He was 32 years old. The cause of death remains unknown. Malaria, typhus, poison. No one can say for certain. But this is certain. Alexander died undefeated in battle. In just 10 years, he created one of the largest empires in human history, stretching from Greece to Pakistan. He won every major engagement through a combination of tactical brilliance, personal courage that bordered on recklessness, and an absolute refusal to accept limits. His empire did not survive him. His generals tore it apart in civil wars. His wife and son were murdered. His gold sarcophagus disappeared, and its location remains one of history's great mysteries. But the impact of his conquests echoed for centuries. Greek ideas spread across his former empire, fusing with local traditions to spark advances in science, art, government, and language. The world he left behind was fundamentally transformed by his decade-long campaign of conquest. He never lost a battle. He conquered the known world before the age of 33, and he did it by consistently making choices that seemed mad until they worked. That moment at the Granicus River, when a 20-year-old king charged across impossible odds, was not recklessness. It was calculated genius, wrapped in fearless execution. To the Persians, he was Alexander the Accursed. To the West, he became immortal, Alexander the Great.